senior Trump administration officials and their Russian counterparts are sitting down in Saudi Arabia this week to discuss peace in Ukraine in the latter's absence, much to the concern of Europe. Meanwhile, top diplomats from South Korea, Japan and the US met in Munich on the margins of an annual security forum and reaffirmed the trilateral commitment against North Korea's nuclear ambitions. And President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial enters its final week with 2 additional hearings on Tuesday and Thursday, but his legal team is requesting a rescheduling of Thursday's session as the president's criminal trial starts on the same day. A senior U.S. delegation is meeting with its Russian counterpart in Saudi Arabia for talks about ending the Kremlin's aggression against Kyiv. The meeting also seeks to lay the ground for a summit between the leaders of the U.S. and Russia, also in Saudi Arabia. Our Yoon starts off.
Washington's Middle East envoy told Fox News on Sunday that he and White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz would go to Saudi Arabia for talks aimed at ending nearly 3 years of war between Russia and Ukraine.
I am going tonight. I'll be traveling there with the National Security Advisor, and we'll be having meetings at the direction of the president, and hopefully we'll make some really good progress with regard to Russia-Ukraine.
However, speaking to NBC News on the same day, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy said Kyiv had not been invited to the talks in Saudi Arabia, adding that Ukraine would never accept any deals made without them. During a previous interview last week, Zelenskyy also remarked that no one, including President Trump, should trust Russian President Vladimir Putin. Regarding Ukraine's absence from the talks, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told CBS News on Sunday that if real negotiations happen, Ukraine must be involved and that Europe must also be involved. He also emphasized that the next few days would determine if Putin was serious about achieving peace. Amid European concern that the U.S. is moving ahead on peace talks with Russia without consultation, French President Emmanuel Macron will hold an informal emergency meeting on Monday on security for Ukraine and Europe. According to officials, the meeting will include Germany, Britain, Italy, Poland, Spain, the Netherlands, and Denmark, as well as the NATO Secretary General and the presidents of the European Council and the European Commission. Also on Sunday, U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters that he's working hard to bring peace between Russia and Ukraine and that he believes the leaders of both countries want to stop fighting. To a question asking about Ukraine's involvement in talks, he answered that Zelenskyy would be involved in the negotiations. Trump also hinted that a meeting with Russia's president in Saudi Arabia could happen soon, but no date has been set.
No, with no time set, but it could be very soon.
Meanwhile, Russia attacked Ukraine with 143 drones on Saturday overnight, injuring at least 1 person. According to Ukraine's prime minister, the attack damaged a thermal power plant in Mykolaiv in southern Ukraine. Zelenskyy said the attack left around 100,000 people without heat. He took to social media to condemn the attack, calling it a sign that Russians are waging war against our people and against life itself in Ukraine. Yoon, Arirang News.
Staying in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and visiting U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio have reaffirmed their resolve to eradicate Hamas from the Gaza Strip while reiterating Mr. Trump's ambitious plans for the region. Our Chae Kyoung-sun reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Israel as his first stop during his first Middle East tour. On Sunday local time, in a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Rubio pledged full U.S. support. He said that threats to violate peace should be eliminated.
Related to that, the president's been very clear. Hamas cannot continue as a military or government force. They must be eliminated. They must be eradicated.
Netanyahu stated that he is cooperating perfectly with President Trump and welcomed Trump's firm stance on the release of the remaining hostages. He also expressed support for Trump's plan to relocate residents and develop Gaza, which has been opposed by many other countries. In response, Secretary Rubio said that President Trump has presented a bold plan.
The president's also been very bold about his view of what the future for Gaza should be. Not the same tired ideas of the past, but something that's new, bold, and something that frankly took courage and vision in order to outline.
The two countries have also agreed to jointly address the nuclear threat posed by Iran.
Israel and America stand shoulder to shoulder in countering the threat of Iran. We agreed that the Ayatollahs must not have nuclear weapons. And we also agreed that Iran's aggression in the region has to be rolled back.
The conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza has entered a 6-week ceasefire from January 19th. The first phase is set to conclude on March 1st, but the negotiations for the second phase of the ceasefire are at a standstill.
So there is no exact timeline to finalizing the second phase of ceasefire plan, but the situation remains fluid and heavily influenced by political maneuvering and the ability of negotiators to facilitate these negotiations.
Meanwhile, Hamas says the 3 police officers were killed in Israeli airstrikes in southern Gaza, while Israel says it hit several armed individuals. Chae Kyoung-sun, Arirang News.
In a recent post on his social media platform, U.S. President Donald Trump sought to defend his reciprocal tariff proposal and dispute the so-called value-added taxes, claiming that America has been mistreated by its friends and foes alike. Our Lee Na-hyun covers his latest remarks.
U.S. President Donald Trump's plans to impose new tariffs on countries that utilize value-added tax systems have added another layer of uncertainty to South Korea's export competitiveness. Trump said Saturday that Washington will treat countries with a value-added tax system the same as those with tariffs in order to help calculate reciprocal duties on other countries. The comment raises concerns for South Korea, which, unlike the U.S., collects value-added tax. Typically, companies in countries with a VAT system, including South Korea, receive a VAT refund when exporting to the U.S. and only have to pay a relatively low sales tax. However, U.S. companies exporting to foreign countries have to pay a high VAT rate that they do not pay in the U.S. And for that reason, Trump has criticized VAT as being an unfair trade barrier for the U.S.
They do have something that is somewhat similar, which is the sales tax. Effectively, the U.S. sales tax can be considered something that is very similar, at least in the results.
And since South Korea's VAT rate is 10% higher than the average U.S. sales tax of 6.6% as of 2023, is fueling speculation that Trump will impose a 10% reciprocal tariff on all South Korean imports in April. Amid concerns over Trump's trade policies, Deputy Minister for Trade Park Jong-won left for the United States on Monday. During the 5-day visit, Park will meet with high-ranking officials from the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative to discuss trade and other pending issues. This will be the first official visit to Washington by a high-ranking trade official since President Trump took office. Park is expected to hear the specifics of the trade policies under the Trump administration and convey Seoul's position on the matter. These discussions are particularly important because it will be challenging for the Korean government to devise response measures as VAT is applied based on the value added at each stage of production.
In the end, it is the consumers which pay the value-added tax. And right now, except for foodstuff, which is exempted, it's 10%. So we'll have to figure out some way to eliminate the import component of that 10%, and that could be difficult.
The same expert also added that another factor that makes this situation complex is how a large portion of the tax revenue for many nations, not just Korea, relies on VAT. Lee Na-hyun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in Germany this past weekend, Foreign Minister Cho Tae-il and his U.S. and Japanese counterparts Marco Rubio and Takeshi Iwaya, respectively, reaffirmed their resolve to rid the Korean peninsula of nuclear weapons, laying to rest rampant fears of a potential shift in American policy on North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Our foreign affairs correspondent PNG covers this commitment and the trilateral support for Taiwan.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-il and his American and Japanese counterparts Marco Rubio and Takeshi Iwaya met for the first time since U.S. President Donald Trump returned to the White House earlier this year and delivered a strong message that appears to be aimed at China. In a joint statement, they expressed their support for Taiwan's meaningful participation in appropriate international organizations. That detail, which could upset China, has never been included in a joint statement by the three countries before. This appears to reflect the Trump administration's hardline stance towards China, as Beijing has been making efforts to block Taiwan from joining the United Nations and many other global organizations. At a session of the Munich Security Conference, Foreign Minister Cho said it's only natural for South Korea to keep relations with both the U.S. and China in harmony to best serve its national interests, but added that this is easier said than done.
We can continue to improve our relations with Beijing while continue to upgrading our strong alliance with Washington. But particularly when it comes to the security issues, there's a limit to what we can do to accommodate demands from Beijing.
The three countries also made it clear in the joint statement that they reaffirmed their commitment to the complete denuclearization of North Korea. This gave reassurance to Seoul, particularly after Trump's comments referring to the North as a nuclear power raised concerns in South Korea, as they led to speculation that Washington could be shifting away from its focus on denuclearizing North Korea. And before the trilateral talks, Cho and Rubio held a separate meeting for about 40 minutes, where they agreed to closely cooperate on deterring North Korean threats. The two sides also reaffirmed that their alliance will continue to remain strong throughout Trump's second term in office, with Rubio reiterating his confidence in South Korea's acting president. Speaking to reporters in Munich, Cho said he expects the two countries to hold more high-level meetings, and that the government plans to consult with Washington on the issue of tariffs on steel and aluminum as soon as possible, to minimize possible damage to Korean companies. 배은지, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial enters its final week with two additional hearings this coming Tuesday and Thursday. But his legal team has requested a rescheduling of Thursday's session as the president's criminal trial starts on the same day. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young has the latest.
The Constitutional Court has not decided whether or not to change the date of President Yoon Suk-yeol's 10th impeachment hearing, as it also falls on the day that his criminal trial proceedings begin. Court press officer Chun Jae-yeon told reporters Monday that the judicial bench has not yet conveyed its decision, and it may or may not be announced before the 9th hearing on Tuesday. After the court decided to schedule two additional trial dates for Tuesday and Thursday this week, Yoon's team has objected to Thursday's session and on Friday filed a request to postpone the date to February 25th. The president's lawyers have on various occasions complained about the twice-weekly hearings, calling for just one session per week to allow for sufficient preparation. Especially as the Seoul Central District Court will begin Yoon's pre-trial hearings for his criminal case on Thursday morning, Yoon's legal team would be spread out over both trials. 15 lawyers are working on his criminal case, 21 on his impeachment trial. Among them, 13 are working on both. While some experts say the overlapping schedule weakens the right to legal self-defense, the Constitutional Court might still push ahead with the impeachment hearing in the afternoon, as the criminal trial is at 10 a.m. The court officer added that the National Assembly's impeachment panel has submitted its position that the Thursday hearing must not be delayed. Meanwhile, she said Tuesday's hearing will see the Assembly and Yoon's side each organise and make their claims from 2 p.m. Thursday's hearing for now will have 3 witness examinations, beginning with Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. Han previously stated that the president had not held a proper cabinet meeting before declaring martial law on December 3rd. Former Deputy Director of the National Intelligence Service Hong Jang-on was summoned earlier this month by the National Assembly side, but will return to be questioned by Yoon's legal team. Hong claims there was a list of 14 to 16 figures the president wanted to arrest under martial law. National Police Agency Commissioner General Cho Ji-ho will be questioned by both sides after missing 2 witness sessions for health reasons.
As the Constitutional Court has rejected all other witness applications, it remains to be seen whether the judicial bench will schedule additional hearings beyond the 10th session. It would take around 2 weeks for the justices to make a verdict based on previous presidential impeachment trials. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The South Korean government and the country's small and mid-sized defense firms are showcasing an integrated booth at the latest 5-day International Defense Exhibition and Conference in Abu Dhabi, starting today. According to the State Arms Procurement Agency, this marks the first time for a joint booth by the two sides at an overseas defense show. South Korea will seek to share its remarkable advances in arms technology at the event as it aims to become the fourth largest defense exporter by the year 2027. In other news, another survivor of Japan's forced sexual slavery during World War II has passed away. According to authorities here, Gil Won-ok passed away at the age of 97 this past Sunday. Following her horrifying ordeal, Gil spent her life seeking to raise global awareness about Japan's atrocities. She was 13 years old when she was taken from her home in Pyongyang and forced to work as a sex slave. Out of the 240 survivors of Japan's shocking wartime system of sexual slavery registered here in South Korea, only 7 now remain. Politicians across the aisle here in the country are mourning her passing. The ruling People Power Party has highlighted the importance of remembering the witnesses of history, while the main opposition Democratic Party has vowed to work on legislation for survivors of Japan's sexual atrocity and for a sincere apology from the Japanese government. On the entertainment front, Squid Game Season 2's production designer has been honored with an Art Directors Guild Award. Chae Kyoung-sun won the award in the one-hour contemporary single-camera series category at a ceremony on Saturday in LA. The Art Directors Guild Awards acknowledges excellence in production design for both small and big screens. Chae also clinched an Art Directors Guild Award for exceptional visuals in Squid Game Season 1. On this segment of the interview, we turn the spotlight onto a rising speed skating star who won a remarkable number of medals at the latest Asian Winter Games in the Chinese city of Harbin. Our Park Ko-nu sat down with her.
2 gold medals, 1 silver and 1 bronze. South Korean speed skater Lee Na-hyun's achievements at the 2025 Asian Winter Games. Skating since the age of 8, Lee recalls how she began realizing her talent as a young child.
That I won gold medals in most of the races when I first started. So I was very into this sport since I was very young, and I think I enjoyed every moment.
That's how things continued. Last year, Lee broke the junior world record in the 500 meters and then went on to win medals in every race at the Asian Games this year. Although Lee humbly said it feels like she has just taken her first step in her career, she is hungry for more medals.
I would love to win so many races as possible. I'll try to get 100. But I think, honestly, like 10 to 15 is, like my goal right now. Yeah.
Showing her humility, she even says she first needs to improve her skills.
My goal is just to keep showing people that I improved in every races, and also to show them a good conditions in the Olympics. I would love to get a medal, but first my goal is to do all the things that I practice in training.
This mindset ties into her personal life motto.
I always tell myself, let's not make this regrettable. Let's show everything I've got. Keep training hard until your role model become your rival.
Called the next Lee Sang-hwa, Lee spoke with admiration for her role model.
I love that nickname and I feel honored, and it makes me feel like I have to do more harder. If I meet her, I would say, I'm a fan of you and I want to be like you, so please watch how I do.
Looking ahead, Lee plans to skate for at least another decade, leaving a message to her future self.
10 years later, I would tell myself to just enjoy skating. Like, no need to get a medal, just keep pushing myself hard. I just do it as you can always quit.
She also expressed her desire to remain the first athlete that comes to mind when thinking of speed skating, while requesting more support for both the sport and herself. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy declined the Trump administration's critical minerals deal, which suggests that the United States take a 50% stake in Ukraine's vast critical mineral resources, citing a lack of security provisions. On Saturday, Zelenskyy said the draft minerals deal with Washington did not include any security guarantees and emphasized that any such agreement must include robust security assurances to protect Ukraine's sovereignty and deter further aggression from Russia. The U.S. proposal was presented by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent during his visit to Kyiv on February 12th and aims to secure half of Ukraine's rare earth mineral rights as compensation for past military and financial aid, as well as payment for future assistance. Trump has previously said he wanted $500 billion worth of critical minerals from Ukraine to reduce dependence on China for rare earth materials. Chinese Premier Li Chang and Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown on Friday held a meeting aimed at strengthening bilateral relations and cooperation between the two nations. The Cook Islands said Saturday that it signed a comprehensive strategic partnership deal with China during the discussions in Harbin. Premier Lee emphasized China's commitment to deepening political mutual trust with the Cook Islands. He proposed aligning the Belt and Road Initiative with the Cook Islands development strategies to enhance collaboration in various sectors, including maritime infrastructure, agriculture, fisheries, and cultural exchanges. Prime Minister Brown acknowledged the nearly three-decade-long friendship between the two states and reaffirmed the Cook Islands' adherence to the One China policy, while assuring that relations with China do not impinge on long-standing ties with New Zealand. In Austria, a 14-year-old boy was killed and 5 people were injured in a stabbing attack in the city of Villach on Saturday. The attacker, a 23-year-old Syrian national, was apprehended at the scene. Authorities have identified the incident as an Islamist attack and said the suspect had sworn allegiance to the Islamic State. A local food delivery driver's swift intervention by using his vehicle to impede the attacker likely prevented further casualties. The attack follows a series of similar incidents in Europe and has intensified discussions on immigration and security policies within the country. Finally, in the United States, Marvel Studios' latest release, Captain America: Brave New World, has delivered box office success during its opening weekend, with the highest-ranking domestic debut of the year. The film garnered $88.5 million domestically over the 3-day period, with projections estimating a total of $100 million by the end of the 4-day President's Day holiday on Monday. Internationally, it accumulated an additional $92.4 million. This performance also marks the 4th best President's Day holiday opening on record. Chae Ji-hee, Arirang News.
It seemed as if spring was coming, but the cold is back again. In Seoul today, the daytime temperature dropped by 7 degrees Celsius in one day. With frigid cold everywhere, cold wave advisories are issued in eastern parts of Gangwon-do province and Gyeongsang-buk-do province. The morning temperature in Seoul is expected to plummet to -5 degrees tomorrow. On Tuesday and Wednesday, it will drop even further to -7 degrees Celsius. The feels-like temperature will stay around -10 degrees. The weather will get colder with stronger cold waves throughout the week. Please take care. Tomorrow, the whole country will start off at below 0 degrees, Daejeon at -6 degrees, and Gwangju at -4 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 3 degrees in Chuncheon, 6 degrees in Busan. With freezing conditions, East Coast areas are still drying out with gusty winds. Extra precautions against fire are necessary. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Thank you for watching.
플라스틱 사실 편리하잖아요. 저조차도 활동을 하고 있지만 플라스틱을 사용할 정도로 생활에 많이 있다고 생각을 하는데요. 플라스틱을 대체할 수 있는 걸 계속해서 찾고 플라스틱이 아닌 다른 것을 사용하는 게 일상의 습관이 될 수 있도록 하는 것이 좀 중요하다고 생각을 해서 삼색클럽 캠페인을 중점으로 활동하고 있습니다. 저희는 HDP랑 PP라는 두 가지 재질의 플라스틱을 모으고 있습니다. 보통 음식류에 사용되기 때문에 배달용기나 이런 곳에서 많이 볼 수 있고, 그리고 두 번째로는 저희가 업사이클 가공을 할 때 가장 유독물질이 덜 나오는 물질이기 때문입니다. 플라스틱을 많이 모으고 많이 제작하는 것이 목적이 아니다 보니까 저희는 시민분들한테 플라스틱 기부받고 리워드를 드리는 게 아니라 모아주신 플라스틱이 이렇게 재활용됐다는 걸 알리기 위해서 하는 프로젝트여가지고 이걸 약간 기부가 아닌 돌려드리는 개념으로 지금 하는 규칙을 사용하고 있는 것 같습니다. 불편한 거예요. 사실 이 플라스틱을 실제로 사용하는 걸 모으고 이걸 세척해서 가져오시고 하는 과정이 이 불편함을 사실 해주고 계신 것만으로도 저희는 되게 감사하죠. 나아가서 플라스틱을 사용하지 않을 수 있는 방법을 내는 것이 저희의 숙제이고요. 그리고 가장 중요한 건 이런 자원순환 활동에 있어서 시민 참여가 어떻게 얼마나 중요한 키워드로 적용이 되는지를 계속 말씀을 드리고 싶어요. 그래서 시민 참여 가이드를 조금 내는 게 저희의 목표이자 바람이라고 말씀드릴 수 있습니다. 나는 플라스틱을 순환시키는 그리너다.
Our lives are swept into a vortex of this intricately connected world, providing an in-depth exploration of global security, diplomacy, economy, and culture to offer a unique international perspective. Embark on a global news journey with the GeoVista today.
Ukraine has highlighted the importance of its presence at peace talks to end Russian aggression as senior Trump administration officials seek to sit down with their Russian counterparts in Saudi Arabia for related talks this week. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello, hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Monday's edition of Press Perspective for February 17th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Ukraine and Europe are calling for a seat at the table as the US and Russia seek to start peace talks to end the Kremlin's invasion of Kyiv. For more on this, I have Chloe Bognon, a correspondent for France 24 here in the studio. Chloe, it's great to have you back.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
I also have Professor Chae Kyoung-sun at Kyung University with us virtually. Professor Chae, welcome to the program.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Right, we'll start here in the studio. Chloe, let's begin with details of the speech given by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at this year's Munich Security Conference.
Yeah, so at Munich Security Conference is the gathering of the world top leaders for policymakers. He made a speech on Saturday, so this weekend. First thing that he said, he wanted the United States not to go behind the back, and I'm quoting him, behind the back of Ukraine to make a peace treaty or any truce talks with Russia. He said that Ukraine would never accept this kind of deal made without their involvement. He's saying that mostly because Donald Trump has been talking with Vladimir Putin on the phone, and he said that he could be meeting soon with the Russian leader to start speaking about any peace truce and a peace treaty. Zelenskyy also asked for security guarantees from the US and Europe to make sure that if a peace treaty was to be made with Russia, to be sure that Russia would not overpass this and attack Ukraine again. And he also asked Europe to find its own voice regarding their own security. And he said, for example, that they should create their own continental army, so separate from NATO, where the US is also included. He said that it is the end of the time when the US would help Europe just because they have always done so.
Right, and Professor Chae, as Chloe just mentioned, President Zelenskyy, he has called for the creation, and I quote, of an armed forces of Europe to ensure security. How do you respond to this suggestion?
Yes, it is true that President Zelenskyy proposed to create a new European army. And I think there is a growing concern about European security. And especially President Zelenskyy is worried that NATO might not be enough to stop future aggression by Russia. And this concern is very understandable, especially with Russia now increasing its military presence in Belarus. But unfortunately, this proposal, I think, is not really realistic, or this is impossible in the near future. There are some reasons. The first, not all European countries agree with this idea. For example, Poland and the Baltic states, they tend to strongly support a close military cooperation among European countries. But on the other hand, other major European nations such as Germany and France may prefer to strengthen NATO instead of creating a new continental army. And NATO has been the key to European security for decades. So changing this system would require a lot of agreement and also negotiation among NATO members. And secondly, there is also some practical problem. A new European army would need a new command structure, military training, and also a large defense budget. NATO already has this system in place, but building a new army from scratch would take many years to prepare this kind of a system. But still, Zelenskyy's proposal has some importance from diplomatic point of view, because he wanted to push European countries to work more closely for their defense. But instead of creating a completely new army, it is more realistic at this stage to strengthen European military cooperation within the framework of NATO. So I think the important question is not whether the Europe should replace NATO, but how European countries can strengthen their defense cooperation.
Right. Meanwhile, Chloe, ahead of his address at the Munich Security Conference, President Zelenskyy sat down with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. What has been disclosed about that particular discussion?
Yeah, so very few details actually have been disclosed from both sides. It was an awaited talk after, again, the Trump and Putin phone call. It was a good talk, according to J.D. Vance, something that Volodymyr Zelenskyy also agreed on. Vance called the discussion fruitful, and he reminded everyone about the U.S. stance. That is, they want to get a global, lasting, durable peace in the area. They say that they don't want to strike a deal only to get a new war in the area, in the Eastern Europe area, in a few years. So that's the main point that he made. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, on his side, again, did not disclose a lot either. What he said is he wanted this discussion to be fruitful as well, to be able to prepare for discussion and for talks with Russia regarding negotiations for a peace treaty. And he said again that he needed real security guarantees from the US. That's something he also, again, said on Saturday in his speech. So that's probably the main point that Ukraine has been trying to convey at that Munich conference this weekend.
Right. Chloe, before we go any further, though, do remind us about the differing conditions for peace as shared by Ukraine and those shared by, previously that is, by Russia, as well as those recently hinted by the US through its Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, so that's quite a lot of things. So I try to keep as short as possible. So regarding Russia, the latest we got was from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Russia, who say that all of Putin's conditions should be met before any peace treaty can go on. So Vladimir Putin's condition, he explained them on the 14th of June on 2024, so he's not been coming back on it at all. There is a few things. He said that the Ukrainian troops should withdraw from the territory of the 4 Ukrainian territories that have been controlled, mostly controlled at least, by the Russian troops at the moment. He also asked for Ukraine to give away their ambition to join NATO. There is also a more global agenda as well. Obviously, Russia would like NATO to be a bit less strong in the area, to have an area of influence around Russia where NATO would not be there too much, also trying to, deter a bit the European countries from being too strong in their own defense and weapons. Ukraine, the main point for them, and they're followed there by quite a few European allies, is no deal on Ukraine without Ukraine. So that's their main stress at the moment, the thing that they're stressing the most at the moment. They also ask for the United States to maintain their current military support. So Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that Ukraine can't do it without the US help in this war against Russia. And security guarantees that Moscow won't start a war again. So Volodymyr Zelenskyy spoke about a peace through strength against Russia. For the United States, let's just speak about the newest things that happened. So Donald Trump said that it is time to make a drug deal. He really wants it to happen now, but it might be hard to get Vladimir Putin to the table of negotiations because he feels like he's winning the war at the moment. So having the upper end, he doesn't want to come down and negotiate anything. And we saw that Donald Trump wants Ukraine to give money back to the US. So he wants to strike a rare earth minerals deal with Ukraine to kind of pay back the military financial help that they've been giving to Ukraine. It was interesting. I read an article by Sean Monaghan from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and he said that for anything to be achieved, US should actually try to go for a smaller deal at first with Russia. So maybe not getting Ukraine into NATO or getting the territories from before 2014, before the Crimea invasion, but maybe go for smaller achievement like local ceasefires, humanitarian corridors, or demilitarized zone, because according to him, the conflict has been going on so long now that they have to go slow and small bites to be able to get anything, any deal struck between Ukraine and Russia.
Right. And Professor Chae, some analysts believe Mr. Putin has been garnering major diplomatic wins amid the return of Mr. Trump. They point out that Putin was the first to speak with Trump about the war in Ukraine and that he may be the first to sit down with Trump about the same issue. Now, during the former Biden administration, Putin was a pariah, but now with the return of the Trump administration, the BBC claims that Putin looks to become a potential partner for the US. Should the world, Professor Chae, be worried?
Unfortunately, it is somehow true that President Putin has made some diplomatic gains with the return of Donald Trump. The very fact that Donald Trump spoke with Putin before contacting President Zelenskyy on February 13 sends an important message. So it suggests that Russia now has a more direct communication channel with the United States, something that was nearly impossible under the previous Biden administration. However, this does not, there's an important question. Does this mean the world should be deeply worried? I think the answer to this question depends on how these talks develop in the future. Putin is now trying to position himself as a key negotiator, but his ultimate goal is not just a ceasefire, but what he wants is to reshape European security, weaken NATO, and also ensure Ukraine remain under the Russian influence. If Donald Trump moves in that direction, then yes, the world should be deeply worried. However, at the same time, it is important to remember that the diplomatic wins do not always translate into strategic victories. Putin still faces strong resistance from European leaders who insist that any deal with Russia must include Ukraine, and also they want to protect European security during this negotiation process. And even in the United States, there is a limit to how much Donald Trump can shift its foreign policy without facing opposition from US Congress and also the military. So while Putin has gained some diplomatic momentum, his ability to fully achieve his goal is still uncertain. The key question is not whether he has gained some influence, but whether the United States and its allies in Western Europe will allow Mr. Putin to reshape the balance of power in Europe.
Right. That being said then, Chloe, prior to actually sitting down with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the US Vice President J.D. Vance, he raised quite a bit of eyebrows by attacking Europe about free speech and democracy. Now, this attack, of course, was quickly rebuked by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz the following day. Could you walk us through this heated interaction between the two sides and, of course, their broader implications?
Yeah, so J.D. Vance was awaited on Ukraine. He gave very little on that, but instead he decided to give a lesson on democracy towards his European allies. So, as you said, some experts have been saying that it was actually a very confrontational speech and a direct effort to influence European politics. Just to give you 2 points studies raised among the many that he made, he first of all was unhappy with the censoring of conservative and right-wing parties and views in Europe. So, for example, he called for Germany to let down the firewall and allow alternative for Germany, alternative for Deutschland, so AfD, that's a right-wing party, like extreme right-wing party, sorry, to enter the federal government in the next elections. He also said that restriction on free speech in Europe were a greater threat to Europe than military aggression from Russia or from China. So there he was directly pointing at the fact that hateful speech is not authorized and should be watched upon, especially on social media. So it did not get a good reception from the room on the day of the speech. some observers say that many people in attendance did not, stayed seated actually when he finished his speech and did not raise to applaud him, which was kind of expected when the speech was that confrontational. So as you said, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz answered to him in the form of a speech on the next day. Why Germany has been especially keen to answer to him is that they are having a major election in the coming days, and the far-right party, Alternative for the Deutschland Party, that has been backed by Elon Musk, by the way, is at the moment second in position in the polls. So that's why Germany also felt a need to answer directly. He said, first of all, Olaf Scholz, that Germany rejects outsiders intervening in our democracy, and he said that it was not appropriate, especially for friends and allies, to do so. He reminded that there was good reason not to work with the AfD, so that's again a far-right ultranationalist politics party. And he reminded also GeoVista that European democracies are actually built from a time when people and politicians noticed that it is possible for democracy to get disturbed and to be destroyed actually by anti-democrat movements. So that's why they don't want to make any compromise. The New York Times was saying, an interesting bit was saying that there was growing unease among European leaders after this GeoVista speech, especially on their relationship actually with the United States, and that on the Saturday sessions on security at the Munich conference, most of the people or European who were taking, making speeches, decided to do that to react predominantly negatively to what GeoVista has said, and most generally to Trump agendas on Europe.
Right, and staying with what Chloe has just said, Professor Chae, Mr. Vance, he also met with a German far-right leader while in Munich for the annual security forum. Now, in recent years, Professor Chae, there has been a bit of concern about the rise of the far-right becoming a global phenomenon. How do you explain this phenomenon?
There are some the regions. I can suggest some three regions that can explain this trend. The first is about economy. The economic problem have made many people frustrated. After the global financial crisis in 2007 through 2009, and also COVID-19 pandemic, income inequality has increased, and many working class people feel ignored and also weakened. This economic concern helps far-right parties gain political support because they provide a simple solution to complex problems. For example, they say like this: we can protect local jobs by reducing immigration. It sounds very simple. And secondly, immigration has caused strong political reactions. And in many Western countries, fast population changes make people worry about their national identity. So some far-right parties use this fear to gain support by opposing immigration and also promoting nationalism. And we can see this clearly in Europe, for example, with the parties like Germany's AfD and also France's National Rally. And third, trust in mainstream politicians is decreasing nowadays. So many people think traditional parties are corrupt, ineffective, or disconnected from real-life problems. The far-right movements present themselves as outsiders who can fight for the people against these old elites. And this is why leaders like Donald Trump in the United States and also Viktor Orban in Hungary have gained popularity among people. So, however, far-right movements also faces some resistance. In Germany, for example, mainstream parties have created a so-called firewall against AfD. And also in some cases, when far-right parties actually win the election, they sometimes struggle to govern well. So, and this kind of limitation can weaken their long-term success possibility. So while this trend is important, I don't think this is necessarily permanent.
Right. Meanwhile, Chloe, back on Ukraine. Now, early last year, French President Emmanuel Macron suggested having troops in Ukraine. I hear this is now a post-war security option for Ukraine. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, so this is an option so that Europe started looking about a year ago, like in early 2024. Emmanuel Macron was quite alone at the time when he made this option possible. Right now, more and more are following this idea, especially with a new sense of urgency. So right now, like today, Emmanuel Macron has been calling up a meeting for the European leaders in Paris, and one of the advisors of the French president said that there is a necessity for Europe to do more and better for the collective security, so of Europe, but also on the question of Ukraine regarding the stance of the US and saying the stance, mostly the withdrawal of Europe or from any of the United States from any European affairs. So the idea would be mostly to have peacekeepers in Ukraine for after a peace deal with Russia would be struck to make sure that Russia would respect the treaty. There was one of the former commanding general of the US Army in Europe who said last month that to do so it would have to be a real strong army force so that Russians would know that if they ever test it, they would get crushed. And he said that Russia would test the limits, according to him. So that's interesting to see the numbers that could happen. Volodymyr Zelenskyy was saying that it should be at least 100,000 force strong. Some media, European medias, were reporting on mostly like 30,000 to 40,000 troops, army troops from all of the different countries of Europe that would participate. There is no confirmation on either. Emmanuel Macron was interviewed in the Financial Times on the question, and for now he said that deploying a huge force is, and I'm quoting him, far-fetched. So the question would be, how much is Europe and European countries ready to engage on a war terrain that's still boiling at the moment and that, as it now, has not been settled at all?
Right. Well, maybe they will discuss it further at the meeting they're having in Paris. European leaders, a meeting called by French President Emmanuel Macron for this Monday. All right, Chloe, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Professor Chae, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Right, on that note, we end Monday's edition of Press Perspective. We'll return same time tomorrow with a look at the latest efforts to address North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Thank you for now.